Hello and welcome to the Guidehouse and Enel Foundation webinar, The Path to Recovery for Distribution System Operators. My name is Benjamin Grunfeld. I'm a partner in Guidehouse and I lead our energy providers team in Europe and the Middle East. I'm really excited to welcome everyone this afternoon, this morning, this evening, depending on where you are. We have a very interesting panel today with individuals who have been managing and leading the electricity distribution system response and recovery from the center of some of the communities that have been the hardest hit by the COVID pandemic. Really quickly, before I introduce them and our agenda, I just wanted to take a minute to introduce Guidehouse and the energy sustainability and infrastructure segment. Guidehouse may be a new name to some of you. Guidehouse is the result of the merger of the public sector arm of PwC in the United States with Navigant Consulting. We're really excited about this new organization and what it brings to clients and to the communities that we operate in. Together, we're over 7,000 employees and we serve clients across 6 key sectors: healthcare, financial services, defense, national security, subnational and local governments, and energy sustainability and infrastructure. Within the energy sustainability and infrastructure team, we work across utility companies, energy providers, the public sector, and investors in large corporates, really leading through insights and helping to drive transformational change associated with the energy transition in Europe, the Middle East, and North America. We've been working with energy companies and utilities in and around the COVID response. We have, developed a series of solutions and are working alongside our clients in really 4 key phases and the 4 key phases of the pandemic: response, restore, redesign, and revitalize. And most jurisdictions, I think, as you'll hear, from our speakers today, are through the respond and restore phases and really starting to think about the redesign and the revitalize. Where do we go from here? How do we build more resilient, more sustainable companies going forward and communities going forward, taking what we've learned and applying it. Thank you. Matthew, if you could advance 1 slide, please. Our partner today on this is the Enel Foundation. I'm going to hand it over to Joao shortly, but before I do, let me just briefly introduce our panelists. From Enel, Mr. Gallo is the head of Enel's Group's Global Infrastructure and Networks business line, managing the electricity distribution operations in 8 countries and serving more than 73 million customers. He's also the vice chair of the EDSO, the European Association representing electricity distribution operators. With Mr. Gallo from Enel is Mr. Amadei, who's the head of operations and maintenance for the Global Infrastructure and Networks division at Enel. And prior to that, he had responsibility in different roles within the electricity distribution business at Enel, including lead of the network business at Endesa, the Enel Group's subsidiary acting in the Iberian Peninsula. And last but not least, we have Mr. Scarcella, who is the Chief Executive Officer and Director of UK Power Networks, which delivers electricity to 8.3 million homes and businesses in London, the southeast and east of England. And prior to taking the reins of UK Power Networks, Mr. Scarcella was the chief executive of a natural gas distribution business in the UK and an electricity distribution business in Australia. In terms of the agenda today, Mr. Gallo and Mr. Amadei will give presentations about the Enel response. Mr. Scarcella will walk us through the UK Power Networks response, And then we're hoping for a lively and energetic Q&A session at the end. There is a chat feature in the GoTo webinar control panel, which usually shows up on the right-hand side of your screen when you log into this webinar. Please submit questions through that chat feature, and we'll do our best to get them to the panelists and get you a response. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to Joao, my partner, and with the Enel Foundation, who's very much been instrumental in helping to coordinate this session today. Joao?
Thank you very much, Ben, and thanks everyone. We are delighted to be with you partnering in this webinar. Enel Foundation is actually taking the opportunity of this moment to propose a series of webinars to share knowledge about what's going on in the sector. We believe it's very important to share knowledge about the way the sector is handling it, and also stimulate sharing of best practices. A few words about the Enel Foundation. We are a non-profit organization. We have been established with a clear mandate to focus on how clean energy can contribute to a sustainable future and a more just society. And we do that by focusing on research and education. And we partner with universities, with research centers, with think tanks, with companies such as Guidehouse to work together and to combine boots on the ground experience of the energy sector with leading academic and research capabilities to deliver a knowledge platform for a clean energy future. So I would invite everybody to follow us on our website and on our social media channels. And today we are talking about a very particular sector within the energy space, the electricity distribution, as a crucial component of the energy transition, because it is an enabler of electrification and decarbonization. As you mentioned, Ben, we will go beyond the immediate response of the crisis with a attempt to look a little bit forward and also think about how the sector will evolve in the coming period, and how electricity distribution operators will actually have a role, a very central one, to play on the green recovery and on rebuilding better and more resilient societies. And we are very fortunate to have with us today Mr. Livio Gallo, Francesco, and Basil. And I will now leave the floor by thanking all of them to be with us to Mr. Gallo. The floor is yours, Livio.
Grazie, Joao. First of all, thank you very much also from my side, Ben. Thank you very much to Guidehouse for inviting us, for sharing our experience in this very heavy worldwide crisis. Next chart, our agenda. A brief overview about Enel and a brief description about our response as group to the pandemic, to the COVID-19, and after we focus on the activities of global infrastructure and networks, about how we manage to implement a business continuity in this very, very heavy crisis. Okay. About Enel, next chart. We are an integrated utility acting in all the sectors, the energy value chain, so from generation, renewable, transmission, distribution, sales. We are present in 35 countries with an installed capacity of 85,000 megawatts, out of which 36,000 are renewables. We distribute electricity across our networks, which are spanning approximately 2.2 million of kilometers, and we have 73 million of customers connected to our network. We count on a very large retail customer base worldwide with 70 million customers in free and regulated in the electric and gas markets. Next chart. These are the countries where we are in, and in most of the countries where we are present and manage our network, we are either the first or the second distribution system operator. We run networks in Italy, in Spain and Romania, in Europe, and in Latin America. We run most of the mega cities in Latin America, the networks of Bogotá in Colombia, Lima, Peru, Santiago in Chile, Buenos Aires in Argentina, and in Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, a part of Rio de Janeiro, Sao Paulo, the whole city, mega city of Sao Paulo, the region of Goiânia, and Fortaleza. The next chart. Our response as group to the pandemic COVID-19. I think, as you might know, Italy has been the first West country to get very hardly hit by the coronavirus. And in order to hinder and limit the possible spread of the contagion, the Italian government has issued a series of restrictions applied first to small cities, after to regions, then to regions, and eventually a complete lockdown. National lockdown was on the 11th of March. All schools were closed, as well also all non-essential business, all retail business were suspended, with the exception of grocery stores and shops selling consumer staples. Now, about 1 week ago, on the 18th of March, the government has declared the end of lockdown. As you can see from the chart, we as Enel immediately reacted to the emergency at the very beginning of the crisis. And first of all, we set up a global task force responsible of managing all the actions in all the regions and counties where we are in, and we implemented immediately a smart working for all our employees around the world. Let's see in the next chart. Okay, thanks to the smart devices which we have up and running, and also to the huge efforts which we implemented in the digitalization of our business in the last years, we were able to get up almost in zero time 37,000 of our people working from home, which is a 13-time increase compared to the situation previous to the emergency. We also minimized the number of workers involved in silent activities, but we always guarantee to have the essential activities implemented. Where remote operation was not possible, of course, the workforce was provided with appropriate protection, with appropriate equipment, personal protection equipment, ad hoc safety training. And this measure has also been not imposed but recommended to our contractors. More or less in zero time frame, we had our force, 50% of our force working from home. In Italy, were 15,000 people, 5,500 people, the half of the workforce in Italy, and also worldwide 37,000, which is 50% of our workforce. The next chart. So we put in place a plan to contrast and contain the contagion of COVID-19 within all the business lines. That means power generation, infrastructure and networks, market, and Enel X, which is responsible for value-added activities. And this was possible leveraging on the digitalization of our asset. We launched our digitalization journey in 2015 to change profoundly the way technologies are used, were and are used to manage our asset base, our customer interaction, and also the way we work. Most of our assets are digitized. 100% of the generation asset are remotely monitored. And our renewable fleet is also most entirely remotely managed. And we have up and running 45 million of smart meters worldwide, and we have thousands of distribution network components remotely controlled, which can allow us to keep real-time control on the asset performance. Of course, a full digital custom operation and interaction channel, and a growing penetration of automation with more than 200 robotic process automation in production. And of course, we have also our application 100% on cloud. Now let's go to the operation which we implemented for facing and for managing the emergency.
Okay.
As I said before, the essential operation like outage management, remediation to critical unsafe situations, urgent connection with customer, increase on load, they were maintained. And from an organizational standpoint, we issued operating instruction very soon to set criteria and protocols, beside the creation of a global task force, as I mentioned before, in charge to coordinate everything. Main attention in this global operating instruction was given to 4 main areas of intervention. The definition of standard criteria and protocols, with the first level of contact, how to manage potential suspected case, how we have to deal with confirmed cases, risk prevention and readiness measure, response and recovery measure, and of course also a very clear definition of a personal protection equipment, which filtering mask, gloves, hand washing procedure, and management of wastes. What about the smart working? The next chart. Okay, the smart working was effectively in place in the company also before COVID-19. And we have been working from remote since 2.5 years. But of course, the high share of simultaneous smart workers is completely different today. You can see here the increasing amount with VPN connections in March and April, and also the increasing amount, the tremendous increase of VPN user session. For managing this remote working, we understood that a very clear and strict agenda was needed. A detailed palimpsest have been defined and spread within the different units at level of the company. And also we defined a set of KPIs put in place in order to assess how we as Enel are managing the situation in comparison to normal times, in order to understand if the efficiency and the effectiveness of a remote working organization is similar and comparable to the previous one, and it is. And also an efficient system of communication, of course, is of utmost importance, and I think it was reliable and put in place. Now, in order to focus on the business continuity of the operation of the networks, I leave the floor to Francesco. Francesco.
Thank you, Livio, and good afternoon to everybody. Can you hear me clearly? Okay, perfect. So let's move to the next picture, please. Okay, here you are in this picture, the 4 pillars of our response and recovery plan that we implemented, as Livio said before, at the end of February. First of all, a task force, a global task force has been appointed at corporate level in order to address the response plan in all the region, taking advantage on the experience of Italy and Spain, the first countries, as you know, massively involved in the outbreak. So we decide to centralize the decision, the definition, the guidelines, and even the purchasing of protective devices such as masks, serological tests, in order to better face the shortage of them at the worldwide level. As Livio said before, we decided to activate the remote working for a significant share of our workforce, reducing in such a way the exposure to the contagion of about 30–50% of our staff, depending on the level of outsourcing implemented in the different distribution companies that we have all over the world. Basically, administrative people, back office, and partially field works as a consequence of the lockdown, the reduction of the operative activity. On the other hand, our main concern was guarantee a high level of protection for the field people and the ones working in the operating center, the essential activities of our business. Some measures have been put in place that we can summarize in individual protective measures, such as self-diagnosis, adoption of protective device, and collective preventive measures. A particular attention was paid to our control center, reinforcing both the infrastructure and the number of operators and checking the reinforcement through extremely severe and realistic stress tests that we performed during the month of March. And finally, we paid particular attention to the work of our contractors in order to support them in this period of crisis due to the lack of activity due to the lockdown. So during the lockdown, aware that we will live together with the pandemic, unfortunately for a long period, we have reshaped our organization of fieldwork, ensuring a seamless recovery transition to pre-outbreak volumes and productivity. And exactly during the KPI session of this morning, we realized that the last week we succeed in getting the same level of activity in Italy of the period before the lockdown. So we have restored the level of volume of activities in Italy, and following, we hope, in Spain. Next chart, please. Okay, thank you. In this picture, in the following ones, summary of the main individual and collective measures put in place for the ones working on the field in the operating center. First of all, we worked on the awareness of our people, providing videos, poster, website concerning on the individual measures, individual protective measures, self-diagnosis before going to work, provision of a service of triage on phone in case of symptoms flu-related, temperature measurement at the entrance of the building, provision on protecting devices, also for the commuting from the home to the office. In case of certified contagion, or even in case of suspected one, a preventing quarantine involves the entire team. So we got at the very beginning of this tragic adventure to close buildings because of a suspect of contagion. But afterward, we reshaped our organization, as I said before. Next chart, please. Next. Oh. Okay, thank you. We paid also particular attention to the organization and the hygienization of our facilities and working station, ensuring proper distance, rule of behavior, segregated space for the meeting, also with third party. Next one. Okay, the cellular organization. This is the basic pillar of our recovery plan. Basically, we have divided and reorganized our workforce in very small units that we call cells, with a maximum of 10 people. In practical terms, we have divided this subunit in our territory, introducing specific rules of behavior. So we introduced staggered shift hours for the entrance of the people at work to prevent crowding at the entrance or in common spaces like locker rooms, canteens. We introduced a fixed composition of the member of the cell, to prevent the widespread of contagion and to facilitate the tracing in case of contagion. Segregated space for each cell. The interaction among different cells have place following certain rules of behavior and in specific place equipped with some, for instance, table for guarantee a distance of at least 2 meters between the people meeting. And we think that thanks to this measure, no contagion during the working time during this month has been demonstrated up to now. So we have, of course, suffered a case of contagion, but there is no evidence of internal contagion among our people up to now. So we think that this measure can be sustainable for the next month. Next chart, please. Next. Okay, operating center. As I said before, particular attention was paid to the operating center due to the high level of automatization of our network. So backup operating center were activated to increase the resiliency in case one or more of our 50 operating center enter into emergency status. Consider that in Italy and Spain, the largest distribution company, we have more. In Italy, we have 28 operating center interconnected. So in case of failure of one, the other n-1 can reshape the service. While in the smallest distribution company, in which we have only one operating center, normally we have an empty room, unmanned, with the SCADA perfectly synchronized. So in this case, we divided the shift of the operators in the 2 rooms in order to prevent the contagion. And afterward, we try to make a simulation of a heavy-duty disaster with reduction of people working in order to check the sustainability of this measure. Next chart, please. Okay, so we have a photo gallery of this initiative. This is a thermal scanner at the entrance of a building in Brazil. Next one. Okay, this is the layout of our operating unit in the Rieti town, in which we have 3 cells distinguished by different colors. So you can see the route to get to the space segregated for this one. Next one. The employees have to follow the strips on the floor, you can see here, in order to get in the straight way possible to the workplace. Next one. Okay, you can skip rapidly. Next one, please. This is an example of segregation. This is a plastic screen removable for reducing the volume of a big room, working place. This is the separation inside the locker room of our workers in Rieti. Next one. Okay. As I said before, we extended our recovery plans also to our contractors and suppliers in order to prevent the effect of possible local default or financial distress due to the lockdown. So we introduced backup clauses in case of failure, or we renegotiate the payment terms, particularly in those countries, I refer to Latin America, basically, in which social security schemes are not implemented. It's important to guarantee to our contractors the business continuity, because we struggled during the last years in order to guarantee a high standard of capacitation and training to our workers. So we have to defend them, and we succeed in doing it. Particular attention is paid to prevent stock breaking of our strategic material. We bought our needs of strategic material for the whole years. And finally, with the capacity of deployment of an annual rate of 4 billion euro investment, of course, we are at disposal of the country in which we operate to implement a plan of digitalization of public infrastructure and carry out analytic investment to overcome the crisis. Thank you for your attention. I leave the floor to Livio.
So at the end, as conclusion, we do think that this pandemic, this COVID-19 emergency was and still is a severe, real stress test for our strategy. A severe real test for our strategy. Our strategy is based on 4 main pillars. You can see them on the screen. Futurability, which means that we do think that the DSO, the distributor, has a pivotal role in the energy transition. And the key word here is flexibility. Grid edge transformation, I think that we can pave the way for the platformization of the energy sector, which means digitalization, electrification, decentralization, including distributed energy resources, renewables, prosumers, and so on. We are building up a network digital twin, which is the digital copy of our network in order to test on the digital twin everything in this complex world before downloading the modification and improvement of our networks. Resilience, innovative resilience, also resilience is still will be a key word for the next coming future. Resilience, innovative resilience means to be able to withstand not only extreme climate conditions, but also market disruptive dynamics, which we think today and which will face even more and more in the next coming years. And at the end, customer engagement, a new role for the customer will be important. I think we have to allow the customer to actively participate in the energy market more and more. So we think that the strategy from which we derive our plan, our action plan and implementation was fine. I think we managed up to now the pandemic, and I think we will still be able to manage the next coming months. Will be a very, very hard learning experience, but I think we will be able to withstand it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Livio and Francesco. Really very insightful, and there's been lots of questions coming through on the chat. But just a reminder to the audience members, if you have a question, post it in the chat. I'm going to hand it over to Basil Scarcella, who will share the UKPN experience, UK Power Networks experience, and then we'll hopefully have 15-20 minutes for Q&A at the end. So thank you. And with that, Basil, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Ben, and good afternoon, good morning to everyone, wherever you might be. I'm looking at the questions there, and I'm assuming you can see my slides. Looking at the number of questions, I'm going to try and be quick because I think there's 20 or so questions building up, so to give us some time to go through the questions. But basically, firstly, thank you to the Enel Foundation and Guidehouse for arranging the webinar. What I plan to do is very quickly give you an overview of UK Power Networks and the group that we are part of, and importantly explain the strategy for responding to COVID-19 and the lessons learned. If you look at our group, obviously UK Power Networks is not as big as Enel, but we are part of a group, the Hong Kong Group, which operates in some 52 countries around the world. It accounts for about 20-25% of the Hang Seng Index in Hong Kong, so it is a significant group. In the UK, the group, as well as having investment in UK Power Networks, you can see in the slide, they invest in gas networks, water networks, deep sea ports, retail, and property. So that's a very quick introduction of the Hong Kong Group. Moving on and focusing.
Maybe if you could hit the slide, the full screen version, it might be easier for the audience members, the slideshow.
All right.
Perfect. All right, thank you.
Okay. So moving on to UK Power Networks, we own 3 distribution and manage 3 distribution networks in London, the east of England, and the southeast of England. There's about 8.3 million customers, or nearly 30% of the UK households and businesses. Its population is about 20 million. We have 6,500 employees, 3,000 field teams, and expenditure over the 8-year period of some £6 billion. This is 12-13, so it's closer to £7-8 billion today, and we distribute 30% of the UK electricity demand. I focus on the vision of our business because when I reflect on the importance of the vision, and sometimes over we've owned the business now and managing it for 10 years, I've often reflected how important is the vision and the culture of a business such as ours. And when I look at our vision of being an employer of choice, a respected and a trusted corporate citizen, and being sustainably cost efficient, the focus on employees, it's in the culture of our employees has actually stood us in good stead, because when we say we want to be an employer of choice, we actually mean it, and we measure how we perform in being an employer of choice on a regular basis. So we aim to be the safest. We aim to be a workplace that our employees love coming to work. We embrace diversity, and we focus on having a skilled workforce for both today and the long term. Now, lots of organisations, you will see in the vision, they say that our employees are the most important asset. In our case, we actually measure it on a daily basis. We are part of the Sunday Times Best Companies setup, where on a yearly basis, the commitment and the engagement of the workforce is measured independently. Keep in mind that 90% of our workforce is unionised, and yet, notwithstanding that, we rank in the top 10 best companies to work for in the UK. We also get ranked by Investors in People, and only the last couple of weeks we've been advised we rank the Platinum, which is only the second company I think in the world in Investors in People that's managed to get accredited Platinum. We also rank number 15 in the National Diversity measure. So when I reflect on that, and clearly we also want to be a respected and trusted corporate citizen, which is all about providing great customer service and having the safest and the most reliable network in the UK. But the employer of choice actually came to the test, it was tested when we had the COVID-19 challenge. And I think our Italian friends indicated that in Italy, the lockdown came into place the 11th of March. In the UK, the similar lockdown, probably not as strict as in Italy, came into place on the 23rd of March. So we're roughly 2 weeks behind Italy, and we are still in lockdown. I think there's an expectation that the lockdown will be eased somewhat next week on the 1st of June, but as of today, we are still in lockdown. We embarked on the way we responded, and it's again, this is very similar, I think, to the way Enel have described the response. We set out in 3 stages: a response stage, a recovery stage, and a reimagination stage. I think it's fair to say we are still on the response with transitioning to recovery, but on the response side, the first thing we did when on the 23rd of March, even before the 23rd of March, we predicted that there was going to be a lockdown. So we actually responded by deprioritizing customer-initiated work, which was non-safety essential. And we involved the unions in the discussion very early on. The senior management team meets on a daily basis, together with the unions at 4 p.m. every day. We changed the vision. As I said earlier, we aim to be an employer of choice, a trusted and respected corporate citizen, and sustainably cost efficient. In response to the crisis, we said we aim to protect our employees, which is in line with being the safest and treating our employees with respect, keeping the lights on, and recover the backlog comes later, but keeping the lights on initially and supporting the vulnerable customers. We are now, as I said, we're still in lockdown, but we are slowly transitioning at UK Power Networks to recovery, where we are looking at planning to recover the backlog of work, which is accumulated over nearly 9 weeks of the lockdown. As I said earlier, we have 6,500 employees. Roughly 50% of the employees work from home. Keep in mind that before the crisis, we didn't have very few employees worked from home. I'm one of those old-fashioned CEOs that don't believe in working from home, but I've actually had to change that view. So we have just over 3,000 employees working from home. They had to be set up working from home. They had to be provided the office type accommodation, the IT, etc. And that was done within days, even before the lockdown came into place. And then we have the reimagination stage, which we're thinking about, but clearly still to come. But just to give you a summary of some of the things we did during the response stage. Firstly, we made sure we didn't take advantage of any of the government initiatives to support businesses. We also guaranteed job security, and some of our guys, some of the field workers that could not believe that we were serious in sending them home. Some of them could not work from home, but we sent them home, and we guaranteed the job security when they will see their friends lining up in the job centres, and that was important. We didn't take any, like I say, any benefit of the government initiatives. We said no redundancies. As it turned out, on the 2nd of April, they also got a 2.9% wage increase. That had nothing to do with the response to COVID-19, but it was planned. But again, that was very well received. We provided an allowance. Schools were closed, similarly to the Italian lockdown. Schools were closed. Some of the employees were saying, how I've got young children, how can I work from home? We provided an allowance for them to pay for a carer if it was necessary. We provided single van allocations so that employees could travel. Keep in mind, we actually have a 2 metre here social distancing requirement. and there was a question, how can employees travel in the same vehicle? So we provided their own vehicle to travel separately. Food provisions, we provided both perishable and non-perishable food stuff at the various depots, so that the employees didn't have to go looking for where to buy food, because the only thing that everything is shut, basically, with the exception of pharmacies and supermarket. We managed to have adequate supply of PPE. We actually revised the work method to respond to COVID-19. In other words, for example, when we had to go in customers' premises, we provided disposable, fire-resistant coveralls. Clearly, they've always had coveralls, but not disposables. There were fire-resistance, and in order to get disposable coveralls, which were fire-resistant, it wasn't an easy exercise. So our procurement guys did an excellent job. But the most important thing out of all of this, when I reflect on, was communication to the workforce on a daily basis, on a consistent basis. As CEO, I provided a daily video, 8 a.m. every morning. I would do a video updating the workforce on what was happening. We provided a Yam Jam, a Yammer type setup on a daily basis to make sure that the communication, one, was regular, and two, importantly, was consistent. Again, the blueprint, we looked at motivating our employees, caring about our employees, conversing with our employee, and considering, making sure that we consider their welfare, and we were always quick in responding to any feedback. The bottom line of it all is we focused, as I say, on protecting our employees. We've had 7 of our employees that have tested positive so far. They're all recovering, and we're pleased about that. But importantly, the employee engagement has remained in excess of 90%, which is the best ever we've delivered. From a keeping the lights on, from a reliability of the network perspective, April and May has been, to be fair, has been aided by great weather here in the UK, but importantly, it's the best 2 months that we've ever had in the reliability of the network. And when it comes to customer service, we've delivered 91% customer satisfaction, and that is measured independently on a weekly basis by the regulator. We also supported the vulnerable customers as we set out in our vision of protecting our employees, keeping the lights on, and supporting vulnerable customers. We proactive communication. As it turned out, it was coincidental, but we were in the process of working with other utilities to develop a fund to provide some financial support, and we found our employees without providing, delivering foodstuff to shielded and vulnerable customers. The recovery, moving on, we're not sure whether it's going to be, in terms of economic recovery, whether it's going to be V-shaped or not, whether it's going to be L-shaped or U-shaped. We're assuming at this stage that there won't be a second peak of the disease, because if that happens, clearly our plans would have to be redesigned. But basically, we are on the way back to recover the backlog, notwithstanding the fact that as I said earlier, we're still in lockdown. The final stage, I don't think some people have suggested that this is the new normal. I don't think this is the new normal at all. Certainly, we're not going to go back to what it used to be, but neither are we going to stay where we are today. I'd imagine that the future will look dramatically different to what has been in the past. Some of our people will continue to work from home. We've readapted we're in the process of readapting the office accommodation in a similar way to what Enel as described, with the intention that if there's an easing of the lockdown next week, we assume that everybody, every workforce, every employee will be coming back to the office. Every manager has been given the responsibility to examine, inspect their workplace together with the unions, make sure that they're regarded as safe, making sure that the social distancing provisions, that the temperature checks are in place, work with the unions, and then welcome back the employees when they come back to the office. Clearly, not everybody's going to come back to the office, because we 2 meter distancing, the office space that we add would only accommodate about 50–60% of the workforce. But we are expecting that everybody will come back, and then there will be a decision to be made as to who continues to work from home from a rotational basis, to ensure that the customers, we continue to deliver great customer service. Lessons learned, as I said, communication to the employees is paramount. Having appropriate governance to move quickly and respond to changes, daily changes to government guidance, possible scenario planning to trigger specific changes in our operation, like I said, working from home, etc. And never ever lose sight of the vision. What is it that we're trying to achieve? As I said earlier, we want to be an employer of choice. We readapted that by protecting our employees during this period, but ultimately the vision will remain to be an employer of choice, a respected and trusted corporate citizen, and sustainably cost efficient, and making sure that as we move towards that vision, it is measurable and senior management remains accountable. I am going to stop there so you can take, and we can hopefully move to questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Basil. That was fantastic, very insightful, and really some interesting actions and plans. We got some great questions in, really addressing and hitting on sort of all the different phases of this pandemic. From immediate response to what does the future look like. We probably won't have a chance to ask and have all of them answered in the minutes remaining, but we will put responses to some of them up on the Enel Foundation website following this webinar as well. So if we don't get to your specific question, we'll respond. We'll post some responses on the Enel Foundation website. Joao, you were going to ask the first question. You want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you very much, Ben. And just to remind everybody that in order to follow up, you have a QR code on your screen that you can scan to keep in mind all our social media channels and follow up from the webinar today. So I would like to start with the theme. As you mentioned, there are a number of questions around the theme of the future. What does the future look like? Particularly starting with Livio and Francesco, some questions addressed to you on at some point you mentioned platformization of the energy sector. Some people are wanting to expand a little bit on that, and also on the idea of innovative resilience. measures that the DSOs can implement in the future. Indefinitely, the question is, how will the DSO of the future look like? Livio, can you address that, please?
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. When we talk about platformization, first of all, we have to think that a network, an electricity network, or every network is a real platform. Above this platform, we can implement a digital model, as I said, a network digital twin, a real work on this platformization, working on this platform, and testing and delivering all the living measures from the real network down into the platform, into the digital network, and to have the real network represented completely in its real behavior in the digital model. No? So we can test in this demanding and very fast changing context in which we work, we can test on a digital model and then we implement over real network. So when we talk about innovative resilience, we talk about the capability of not only to withstand the resilience related to extreme climate conditions, we talk about the capability of being able to be resilient against the market disruptive dynamics, increasing amount of renewable, distributed generation, electric vehicles, prosumers. Everything will change very rapidly. Now we are managing, for instance, in Italy, 800,000 of prosumers of distributed generation connected to our network. We were used upon a time to manage 40 very big generation plan. Now we have generation injecting, not controllable, increasing every year. The electric vehicle is not taking place very fast, but every year is increasing. The prosumers, the amount of prosumers is increasing. So the capability of being able to be resilient in this situation, and also the magic word is flexibility, we think is essential to draw the new role of the distributor, which is, I think, and will be very important in the energy transition because the network is in the center connecting every actor. So aggregators, this new important dynamic figure of the market, customer, prosumer, distributed generation, customers, traders, retail companies, every one of them is connected to the network. So we have to be able to be resilient and flexible. And for this purpose, for this objective, we are trying to build up our platform in order to be able really to be resilient and flexible.
Thank you very much, Livio. Ben?
Yeah, so I think, you know, all of you talked about how this pandemic, you know, really abruptly changed the operating environment, right? And although, you know, we certainly don't expect this level of lockdown and, you know, restriction to last forever, I suspect some aspects of what we've experienced these past few months will remain. You know, what do you think are the, you know, sort of what, Basil, you talked about a new normal. What do you think, you know, some of the, what is that lingering change, or what do you think kind of characterizes the new normal from an operations perspective that's different?
Yeah, but can I just make a comment on the previous question as well, because and it's I'm answering a question with a question. I think when we talk about resilience, I often wonder, in the one hand, I think the regulators around the world would understand more the importance of resilience and providing essential services. We've seen it with our National Health Service here, where traditionally government have tended to cut back on expenditure, and now you see that resilience and had we spent more money, we would have been better prepared. Given the networks, both here in the UK and in Italy, have responded so well, would the regulator in future allow more expenditure on resilience or less expenditure, given that the regulators, the networks have performed very well. I like to think from our end that that will allow more expenditure, but I just wonder about that. What is the new normal? I've got to say, from a transition to low carbon, and again, I think Livio talked about this, but the transition to low carbon, I'm not sure that that is going to change too much. For example, we've got 200,000 prosumers that are connected to the network, when 10, 15 years ago, we probably had 20 connected to the distribution network. We expect to have 4 million vehicles, EVs, that would, out of our 8 million households, that would have, by 2030, will have an electric vehicle. That is virtually an increase of 50% of our customer base. We need to have, and we haven't got it today, visibility of the low voltage network to ensure that we understand at street level what is the spare capacity of the network. How can we control the low voltage network remotely? And so all of that, how is the network going to be balanced in real time as a distributor? In the past, we haven't had a need to balance the network nationally. The transmission company has done that. But I think because of the number of distributed generation connected to our network, we will need to balance our network locally rather than nationally. So all of that, I think, will change the way a distribution company is run and managed in the future. I think the COVID-19 experience, as I said earlier on, actually adds to the importance of resilience of that network.
Francesco,
Thank you, Basil.
Similar perspective from Italy.
Agree. The role of the regulator is absolutely basic. I think that we have the great opportunity to share one of the most illuminated regulator in the world, because in Italy, the output regulation for the quality of service was implemented at the end of the previous century. So we could invest a lot of money with the clear target of improvement, the SAIDI indicator that are the basic indicator of our management, and also the management of the renewables. Consider that during the last 10 years, we connected to our network about 25 gigawatt of power directly connected to the medium voltage and low voltage network, raising huge problems of voltage control and power control that we succeed in managing thanks to the meters, the automatic meter reading system that we started to install in the year 2001. We are now at the second generation that enable us to check the load to each quarter of hour. For this point of view, the lockdown has been a very severe test for the balance, for the stability of the electric system in Italy, because the load during the working day was lower than the normal. So during the period of Easter, the Italian TSO asked us the curtailment of about 200 megawatt of renewables in order to guarantee the stability of the system. So the smart grid, I saw some question about this big philosophic concept. The smart grid is a reality. We need the smart grid in order to face the change of the energy paradigm. And in Italy, in which we have so huge penetration of renewables in our distribution network, we need, of course, this kind of solutions.
Thank you, Francesco. And we are running out of time. I would like to thank everybody that is still on the line. Maybe I will have the final question because the topic of the future is still present. And there was something that a lot of people commented on, which is the network digital twin, Livio, that you mentioned. Someone asking if you can give a status of the implementation of that in the networks of the Enel Group around the world.
So I can start answering, and after leave also the floor to Francesco, so can complement to this question. I think we are working since maybe 2-3 years about this digital model of a network, implementing LiDAR technology, laser imaging, detecting and recognition for taking the real picture of a network, using also geo-radar localization for the underground networks. And we are working in all the countries where we are in, of course, starting in Europe, in Italy and in Spain, but also mainly working with this digital model in the mega cities which we run, like Bogota, like Santiago, Lima, and also Brazil. We are launching a major project just for making a clear comprehension of this network digital twin in São Paulo called Urban Futurability, where we are digitalizing a district of São Paulo, taking the picture of all the assets and also considering to take the picture of all the trees, plantation, the buildings, in order to have a clear vision of a development of a network, of the development of all the area close to the network. And we can fill in this digital model with the living data coming from the networks, of course, all the electrical data, but also coming from other sectors which could be of interest to the municipality. So we can take a measurement of number of people crossing the road, number of fleet, temperature, humidity, wind, whatever, and send all this data to the municipality, building up a platform where we can cooperate in order to be able to run the network in the most efficient way, but also to provide the information to the municipality in order to build up a development plan of the city, of the mega cities, connected to the energy development plan, and to cooperate in an API economy on this platform for building up a better service to the customer, but also for building up a better future for the people living in the mega city. As you know, the trend of the future is we will have more and more people living in the cities, maybe 75%, 80% in the next 10 years, more or less. People are saying with different figures, but the trend is very clear. And so I think we have a distributor to take care of this trend and to be able to give the best quality of the people of the cities and working in the mega cities. Also taking in consideration the rural area, of course, but the main issues are related to the mega cities. And I think that the network digital twin could be an answer. I don't know if Francesco, you want to add something to it.
It's impossible to say better. Of course, in our philosophy, our network is a graph, is a conjoint of branch and node. So the basic is that we will associate to each branch and each node of our network a number of attributes: the value of the asset, the technical characteristic of each branch, the impedance, the cross-section, the insulation, the voltage level. And also we can gather, thanks to this kind of helicopter driven by inspection driven by helicopter, the possibility to have the coordinate of each single point in which we find a kind of failure. For instance, distance with trees of buildings. So we can mix all this information in order to associate the performance of each branch of our network to the possible cause and characteristic of the network. This kind of approach will radically change our information system, moving from a database based on relation to a database of graph. So it's a huge transformation, but we need to do it because we have to face the expectation of customer higher year by year, and in order to answer to the proper level of performance required by our regulators. But we can organize a webinar on this topic, of course.
Wonderful. Basil, Francesco, Livio, thank you so much. To everyone who joined in, thank you. This would normally be the moment where I'd ask you all to thank our panelists and thank these gentlemen for their insights and contribution. I'll do that on your behalf. So thank you all. Really a pleasure to host this with the Enel Foundation. I think it's been a very insightful dialogue, and we certainly appreciate everyone's time and everyone's participation. As Joao mentioned, there is a Q code on the screen where you can find additional information about this webinar, as well as some of the responses to the questions that we didn't get around to this afternoon. So with that, I will say thank you again, and we will speak to you all shortly.
Thank you.
Grazie a tutti.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ciao a tutti.
Bye. Bye.